I was 3 years old when my father put an Atari controller in my hand for the very first time. The game was Worm Wars. The TV was a 12-inch black and white. We sat in front of the small TV and played for what seemed like hours. At the time, it was probably 20 minutes, but to me, at that age, it felt like an eternity. From that moment on, a seed was planted, and a deep love of video games began to grow within me. A growth that continues all the way to this day in my adulthood. I was at the ground floor of gaming. I started on the Atari, and I moved to the Nintendo, and then Super Nintendo, and Nintendo 64, and the Sega Genesises, and then the PlayStations 1, 2, and 3, and 4, the Xboxes, the Nintendo Switches and Wiis, all the way to VR gaming and PC gaming nowadays. In my lifetime, I've spent countless thousands of hours playing video games. If I'm sitting in front of a TV, I'm not watching it, I'm interacting with it. But over those thousands of hours, there's one moment that stands out above the rest. One moment that changed my relationship with video games forever. Final Fantasy VII holds a special place in my heart. Like many kids my age at the time, the cutscenes they showed in the commercials absolutely grabbed me. I was hooked. I wasn't sure exactly what type of game this was. All I knew is I needed to have it. But I'm not gonna lie. When I first fired up the game and jumped in and saw those polygon characters, my immediate thought was, I was absolutely duped. But then I had my first battle, which went a long way in easing my fears, as the graphics were much better than the polygon characters you use to traverse the world. I kept playing, not really sure if I could really, truly get into this game. But I pushed on. And by the time I blew up the first reactor, I was 100% on board. What surprised me the most was the level of storytelling in this game really was something I had never experienced before in any other game on any other system. Obviously, Atari was basic, and Nintendo was, building stories, but stories for children. This was a story for adults. Up to this point in my gaming life, the worst thing that ever happened to our characters was sometimes your princess would be in another castle, and you'd have to go somewhere else to save them. They weren't here. You did all that dungeon crawling for absolutely nothing. At this point in the game, Aerith had left our party. We were on a long journey trying to track her down, even going through a forgotten forest. Finally, our journey comes to an end, and we have found her. It won't be long now before we're reunited with our overpowered healer. Unfortunately, the game had different things in mind, and I was not prepared for the dark places we were about to go. It was done. Was this real? I was confused, angry, sad, shocked, in denial. I was feeling every emotion Cloud was. Could this be another Ket Sheaf fake death? Or Kate Sith if you're a savage? No. No. This one feels different. This one felt much, much different. At this point, I could feel the tears welling up inside. Like I said, I had never experienced anything even remotely close to this in a video game before. I didn't even think or even know that this level of storytelling and this level of tragedy in a video game was even possible. It literally blew my mind. This is the moment that changed my relationship with video games forever. Because at this moment, I realized that video games were much more than just a side-scroller or a platformer or an RPG. They were epic tales. Epic stories of heroism, of tragedy, of great accomplishments. And now, after the biggest tragic moment I have ever experienced, it's time to fight. And I don't want to fight at this point. I'm still picking my jaw up off the floor. But here comes Jenova, and we have no choice. Aerith's theme continues to play in the background during the Jenova fight. This replaces the typical boss theme music or Jenova theme that may have been here. I begrudgingly trudged through this fight, which was not easy on a first playthrough. Especially when you're kind of in an emotional state from the horrible act you just witnessed. But I was holding it together. I was going to persevere. I was going to get through this. As the battle raged on, I found it harder and harder to fight back the tears. They were really, really trying to force their way out. But like I said, I was going to get through this. I was going to persevere. I was not going to cry. The reason I wanted to do this as a first video is because this is really my origin story. An origin story that was, at this point, 12 years in the making. But, I mean, this was truly the moment that I fell in love with video games. That I fell in love with the storytelling aspect and the adventures I could go on with them. I looked at video games in a completely different manner from that day moving forward. It was something that changed how I even selected games that I wanted to play. Long gone were the days of saving the princess from a different castle. I wanted more adult theme in my video games, and PlayStation 2, that era, was the first time systems were really starting to provide that. But I was ready for that next step. I was a young teenager, ready to take my video gaming to a completely different level. You know, it's something that even shapes the way that I still play games today. This game, far and away, is my favorite of all time. I've replayed it countless times. And I always come back to this moment. This moment of finality, of closure. During that first playthrough, all those years ago, nearly 3 decades now, I had remained stoic. I'd held it together. Up until this point. But now, acceptance had come, and I openly wept. Aerith was indeed dead.